What if the fairy tale was never as clean as it looked? What if behind the glittering facade of royal tiaras and red carpet smiles lay a secret so tangled, so inconvenient, that even Prince Harry himself wasn't prepared for it? Imagine this. Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, known for her own controversial past and her startlingly candid tongue, steps forward and drops a revelation that rattles the very foundations of Harry's world. A revelation that drags Meghan Markle back into whispers of yacht days and entanglements with none other than Prince Andrew. Let me ask you, how would you react if your spouse's name suddenly collided with the darkest chapters of your family's history? Shocking, isn't it? And yet, this is exactly the storm now brewing. From the moment Meghan Markle burst onto the global stage as Harry's new love, the press has been relentless in digging through her past. Every ex-boyfriend, every half-forgotten acting gig, every whisper of ambition. They've all been picked apart and magnified. But this is different. This isn't some obscure blind item or a rumor buried in a gossip column. This is Sarah Ferguson, a woman who has lived and breathed the royal machine, suggesting that Meghan's introduction to the shadowy world of yacht parties wasn't as innocent as we once thought. Think about the timing here. At a moment when the Sussexes are struggling to maintain their image after business setbacks, after brutal tabloid wars, and after being called out for hypocrisy, Fergie throws in a bombshell that threatens to unravel Harry's entire defense of his wife. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But before we dive deeper, let's ask the uncomfortable question: why now? Why would Fergie, of all people, make such a comment? She knows the cost of scandal. She knows what it's like to be shunned, to be laughed at, to be branded as the royal misfit. And yet here she is, casting a shadow on Meghan. Is it revenge? Is it deflection from Andrew's own controversies? Or is it, perhaps, a bitter kind of truth-telling that only an insider would dare whisper out loud? We need to rewind for a moment. Yacht parties. The very phrase conjures up images of glamour, exclusivity, power. But behind that glitz lurks something murkier. These floating palaces were often the playgrounds of princes, moguls, and models, worlds colliding in ways that the public never truly saw. And for ambitious young women, these yachts could be both an opportunity and a trap. It was networking on steroids. Careers could be made or destroyed, based on who was invited, who was seen, and what whispers followed after. So when Meghan's name gets tied into this narrative, it's not just about whether she attended a party on the water. It's about what that symbolizes, what it implies, and how it reframes the polished story she and Harry have fought so hard to control. And here's where things get even more ironic. Sarah Ferguson knows this world. She lived it. She was married to Prince Andrew. After all, the very man now infamous for his associations with Jeffrey Epstein and a string of scandals that refused to die. Fergie herself has been caught in embarrassing stings, shady financial dealings, and moments that left the Queen herself reportedly horrified. So when she speaks about Meghan's alleged first client connection to Andrew, she's not just tossing words into the air. She's hinting at a darker overlap, a collision between Meghan's supposed past and Andrew's infamous reputation. Now, picture Harry's reaction. The man who walked away from the monarchy to protect his wife, the man who stood on global stages defending Meghan's honor against tabloids, suddenly hearing whispers that she might have been tied to his disgraced uncle's world before she ever met him. How does one even process that? Does he dismiss it as jealous gossip from a woman trying to stay relevant? Or does the seed of doubt plant itself deep, gnawing at him when the cameras are off and the crowds have gone home? You see, this is where the story transcends mere scandal and cuts into something more human: trust. Every marriage is built on it. Every relationship hinges on it. And yet, in the royal world, where secrets and image are currency, trust is both fragile and priceless. So imagine Harry, already scarred by a lifetime of betrayal, by the press, by the institution, by even his own family, now facing whispers that Meghan might not have told him everything. The irony is suffocating, isn't it? The man who declared he was protecting his wife from the same fate as his mother may now be realizing that Meghan's past is a battlefield all its own. But here's the kicker. Sarah Ferguson didn't just blurt this out in a vacuum. Her words landed at a time when the Sussexes are most vulnerable. Their business ventures are faltering. Their approval ratings are slipping. The Invictus Games, once Harry's proudest creation, has been criticized for Meghan's overshadowing presence. Spotify dropped them. Netflix is reportedly losing patience. They are, in many ways, cornered. And what happens when someone is cornered? They fight harder, they spin louder, they cling desperately to control. Which means that Fergie's revelation isn't just embarrassing, it's strategically devastating. It throws Harry and Meghan off balance, forcing them to play defense once again when what they desperately need is a win. So, I'll ask you again, why now? Is Fergie settling old scores? Is she protecting Andrew by shifting attention toward Meghan? Or is she simply being Sarah, unguarded, reckless, unable to resist stirring the pot? Whatever the motive, the result is the same. The image of Harry and Meghan as a united, unbreakable team is cracking. And when cracks appear in a royal narrative, the press and the public rush in to widen them. And let's not forget the symbolism here. Andrew, long branded the black sheep of the royals, now intersects with Meghan, the self-proclaimed outsider who shattered royal tradition. Two scandal-ridden figures, linked by Fergie's casual revelation. What does that do to Harry's carefully curated identity as the rebel prince who chose love over duty? Suddenly, his rebellion looks less like freedom and more like entanglement in another web of shame. As the cameras roll, as the headlines churn, as the whispers grow louder, one thing is certain. This revelation isn't going away quietly. Too many people are invested. Too many reputations are on the line. Too many secrets have already been unearthed. Which leads us to the one question Harry himself may be asking in the silence of Montecito nights. What if the love of his life was hiding a past that makes her more like his uncle than he ever imagined? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Scandal. That single word has followed Sarah Ferguson like a shadow since the day she married into the House of Windsor. Before Meghan Markle ever set foot into royal life, before Harry became the world's most famous runaway prince, there was Fergie, the original royal outsider. She was once welcomed as a breath of fresh air, a vivacious redhead who was supposed to modernize the monarchy alongside Princess Diana. But instead, she became one of its greatest embarrassments, dragged through headlines that made the palace squirm. So when Sarah Ferguson decides to speak, especially about Meghan, people listen. Not because she's always right, but because her life has been marinated in royal secrets, mistakes, and unapologetic honesty. And this time, her words were sharper than ever. Let's rewind. Sarah Margaret Ferguson, affectionately dubbed Fergie, entered the royal family in the 1980s as Prince Andrew's bride. At first, she was embraced, funny, approachable, everything Diana seemed to be, but with her own flair. But the honeymoon period didn't last long. Scandals soon followed. Affairs, tabloid photos, financial chaos. The infamous toe-sucking incident splashed across newspapers worldwide. Can you picture the Queen's horror? The monarchy prides itself on control, discipline, appearances, and Fergie shattered that illusion with reckless abandon. Now, why does this matter for Meghan Markle? Because Sarah Ferguson knows what it's like to be the subject of royal humiliation. She knows the sting of being cast out, mocked, and painted as a pariah. She knows the loneliness of being sidelined while the institution rallies to protect its own. In short, she knows Meghan's pain better than almost anyone else. But here's the twist. Rather than protect Meghan, she's exposing her. Isn't that strange? One would think Fergie, of all people, would show solidarity. Instead, she drops a bomb tying Meghan to the very man whose scandals have blackened the royal brand more than anything else, her ex-husband, Prince Andrew. Think about that irony for a moment. Fergie, who once defended Andrew even after the Epstein nightmare, now implicates Meghan in Andrew's world. The very world of yachts, questionable company, and whispered dealings. And she does it in a way that makes Meghan sound less like an innocent outsider and more like someone already entangled in the royals' darkest corners long before Harry ever came into the picture. But let's not rush. Let's break this down. Fergie has always had a reputation for loose lips. Palace aides dreaded her interviews, her memoirs, her offhand comments. She was unpredictable, and unpredictability is the royal family's kryptonite. They want loyalty. They want silence. They want discretion. And yet here's Fergie, decade after decade, offering up tidbits the Windsors would rather keep buried. Sometimes it was harmless oversharing. But other times, like now, it's dynamite. Why dynamite? Because it strikes at Harry's most vulnerable point, Meghan. You see, Harry built his entire post-royal identity on protecting Meghan from what he calls the toxic press and the institution that failed his mother. Every speech, every Netflix docuseries, every interview, Harry paints Meghan as the target, the victim, the one he must shield at all costs. But Sarah Ferguson's revelation flips that narrative. It suggests Meghan wasn't just an innocent victim, plucked from Hollywood and thrown to the wolves. Instead, it implies she may have willingly moved in the same shadowy circles that swallowed Andrew whole. And if that's true, then Harry's grand crusade begins to look less noble and more naive. Let me ask you, do you think Fergie understands exactly what she's doing? Because I'd argue she does. Sarah has lived long enough in this royal soap opera to know her words carry weight. She knows the press will amplify them, twist them, magnify them until Meghan's name and Andrew's name are plastered side by side. That's not an accident. That's precision. And for Harry, it's devastating. Now, let's layer in another emotional beat. Sarah Ferguson and Meghan Markle actually share something deeply personal. They both know what it's like to be labeled the outsider who doesn't belong. Fergie was never truly accepted by the royals. Meghan, too, has spoken about feeling excluded, mistreated, misunderstood. Both women were seen as too brash, too ambitious, too different. And yet, instead of banding together, Fergie draws a line in the sand. Why? Is it jealousy that Meghan received more global attention than she ever did? Is it resentment that Meghan, despite her controversies, managed to snag her prince and walk away with millions in deals while Fergie remains financially entangled in Andrew's mess? Or is it simply Fergie being Fergie, blunt, unfiltered, and unwilling to bite her tongue, even if it means burning Meghan in the process? This leads us to another important point, Fergie's credibility. Yes, she's scandal-prone. Yes, she's been caught in lies before. But precisely because of that, her words feel raw, unpolished, and uncalculated. When she speaks, it feels less like palace PR and more like an insider spilling tea at the kitchen table. And that's what makes her dangerous. Because while palace courtiers carefully construct narratives, Sarah blurts out fragments that sound too wild to be invented. And wild stories stick. They burrow into the public consciousness, no matter how often Harry and Meghan try to deny them. But here's the emotional dagger. Fergie's revelation doesn't just taint Meghan. It humiliates Harry. Think about his position. He abandoned his family, his military roles, his homeland, all in the name of Meghan. He defended her against accusations, against whispers, against headlines that painted her in the darkest light. And now, the whispers are coming from within, from someone who knows the royals inside and out. Someone Harry can't dismiss as just another racist tabloid. This isn't a gossip columnist. This is Sarah Ferguson, his aunt by marriage, the mother of his cousins, the woman who still shares family holidays with his disgraced uncle. What does Harry do with that? Ignore it? Fight it? Lash out? No matter what he chooses, the damage is done. The story exists. The suspicion lingers. The curiosity gap widens. And as you and I both know, once doubt enters a marriage, once humiliation sinks into pride, it's almost impossible to erase. Now here's the cliffhanger. Sarah Ferguson's revelation may sound like idle gossip, but it's the tip of a much larger iceberg. Because as we peel back the layers of Meghan's pre-royal years, the Yacht Days narrative begins to collide with Andrew's darkest chapters in ways that make this revelation far more dangerous than a passing remark. And Harry? He's about to face the kind of humiliation no prince ever wants to confront. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What is it about yachts that makes them so intoxicating to both the powerful and the powerless? Floating palaces on crystal waters, filled with champagne, music, and whispered deals that could change lives. To the outside world, these are glamorous retreats, symbols of wealth and privilege. But to those who've been inside, yachts can be something else entirely. A stage for ambition, a marketplace for connections, a theater of temptation. And when Meghan Markle's name gets tangled in the word yacht, it isn't just about whether she attended a party on the sea. It's about what that symbolizes. The murky, transactional world where beauty, influence, and opportunity intersect in ways that are rarely innocent. Let's start with the obvious. Yacht parties have always been shorthand for luxury. Monaco, St. Tropez, Cannes. These were the epicenters of a secretive ecosystem where royals, tycoons, celebrities, and starlets mingled. Think about it. No paparazzi, no rules, just a curated guest list where everything was available for the right price. But here's the darker truth. Yacht culture wasn't just about fun in the sun. It was about access. For young actresses or models, an invitation could mean a leap into elite circles. For wealthy men, it was about having beautiful company at arm's reach. Deals were whispered, relationships were transactional, and reputations were made or destroyed within the span of a weekend on deck. Now, imagine Meghan Markle in this world. A struggling actress, hustling for roles, craving the connections that could catapult her career. Is it really so far-fetched that whispers of her being on these yachts began to circulate? Let me ask you, if you were a young woman in Hollywood, climbing against impossible odds, and someone handed you a golden ticket to mingle with the world's most powerful players, would you take it? Or would you turn away, knowing that ticket might come with strings attached? Here's where the irony bites. Meghan has always branded herself as the self-made woman, the girl who clawed her way from a small role on Suits to global stardom. And yes, she did work hard. But Sarah Ferguson's revelation throws a shadow on that narrative. Because if Meghan's connections to the royal world stretched back to yacht days linked with Andrew, then her rise wasn't quite as accidental as she's portrayed. Suddenly, the carefully curated story of ordinary girl meets prince looks more like ambitious actress with powerful contacts finally cashes in. That's not the fairy tale Harry sold us. It's a political thriller. Let's pause here. Yacht parties weren't just playgrounds. They were whispers in waiting. People gossiped. People noticed. And when Meghan's name started to appear in the same breath as those circles, it wasn't just idle speculation. It was a warning sign. Because in high society, rumors are currency. They get traded, exaggerated, and weaponized. So when Fergie ties Meghan's past to Andrew's infamous world, she isn't inventing something out of thin air. She's amplifying whispers that have existed for years. Whispers Harry hoped he'd never hear. And here's where things sting even more. Prince Andrew himself was notorious for surrounding himself with glamorous women during these yacht-fueled escapades. Some were there willingly. Others, as we know now, were not. His ties to Jeffrey Epstein have forever tainted his name. So when Sarah Ferguson says Meghan was his first client, whether she meant it literally or figuratively, the implication is toxic. It doesn't just hint at proximity. It suggests complicity. And that single word, complicity, threatens everything Harry has fought to protect. But let's step into Meghan's shoes for a moment. Imagine being a young actress, standing on the edges of Hollywood, watching doors slam in your face while others climb faster because of who they know. Then imagine being invited into a world where those doors might open. Would you rationalize it as networking? Would you tell yourself it's harmless? Meghan has always been ambitious, and ambition is not a crime. But ambition is also ruthless. And in the cutthroat world of entertainment, ambition often means blurring lines between opportunity and compromise. Here's the contradiction that makes this so juicy for the public. Meghan the Duchess has worked tirelessly to craft an image of moral high ground, a humanitarian, a feminist, a victim of royal cruelty. But Meghan the actress may have played a very different game, one that Sarah Ferguson has now dragged into the spotlight. And if both versions are true, then which Meghan is the real one? The polished duchess who stands at podiums talking about integrity? Or the hustler who knew how to leverage any opportunity, no matter how messy? Now, ask yourself, what does Harry do with this information? He has spent years painting Meghan as the target of unfair attacks. But when those attacks come from inside the family, when the accuser is his own aunt by marriage, the man who has always lashed out at the press suddenly has no easy target. He can't dismiss Fergie as a tabloid journalist. He can't accuse her of not knowing the royals. She is the royals, and she's lived the same scandals Meghan now faces. That's what makes this revelation so much harder to dismiss. But here's where the tension escalates. Yacht parties aren't just about Meghan. They're about Andrew. And Andrew's name is poison in the royal brand. The man stripped of titles. The man humiliated in court settlements. the man whose scandals nearly broke the monarchy. Linking Meghan to him isn't just gossip, it's branding her with the same stain. Imagine Harry's fury at that. Imagine his humiliation, knowing the public now sees his wife tied to his disgraced uncle in ways he never anticipated. And what about Sarah Ferguson herself? Why choose to say this now? Some argue she's bitter. Others say she's deflecting attention from Andrew's never-ending scandals. Still others believe she simply can't resist stirring the pot. But whatever th. But here's the cliffhanger you need to sit with. Yacht parties were only the beginning. What Sarah Ferguson hinted at was not just about Meghan attending glamorous gatherings. It was about Meghan being part of a transactional world that Andrew inhabited long before Harry ever entered the picture. And the question that now lingers, haunting Harry in ways he can't escape, is this. Was Meghan's fairy tale entrance into royal life really just coincidence? Or was it the culmination of connections forged in the shadows of scandal? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. First client. Two words that sound almost casual, innocent even. But in the mouth of Sarah Ferguson, when tied to Prince Andrew and Meghan Markle, they become a loaded weapon. Because what does it mean for Meghan to have been described in those terms? Client of what? First, in what sense? And why would Fergie, of all people, even frame it that way? These aren't words chosen lightly. They drip with implication, and in the court of public opinion, implication is often far more destructive than proof. Let's be honest. When you hear Prince Andrew and client in the same sentence, your mind doesn't go to something wholesome. Andrew's reputation has been cemented in scandal. His friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, his infamous denial interview, where he bizarrely insisted he couldn't sweat, his quiet financial settlements that screamed of guilt without saying it outright. Andrew is radioactive, and Sarah Ferguson knows this better than anyone. She has spent decades standing by him, even as the world recoiled. So for her to suddenly link Meghan to Andrew in such a transactional context, well, it raises more questions than answers. Let's dissect the language. The phrase first client has undertones of mentorship, arrangement, or worse, something transactional in nature. When applied to Andrew, the imagery is unavoidable. He was notorious for surrounding himself with young, glamorous women, models, actresses, social climbers. His world was a carousel of connections that blurred the lines between personal indulgence and professional opportunities. So when Fergie hints that Meghan may have been his first client, she isn't just saying Meghan was present. She's implying Meghan may have been one of the earliest women to enter Andrew's orbit through the very same mechanisms that later destroyed his reputation. Now, let's not forget Sarah Ferguson's history with Andrew. They divorced, yes, but they never really separated. They still live together, they still spend holidays together, and Fergie has defended him even in his darkest hours. She has every reason to protect him, and yet here she is, dragging Meghan into his world. Is this a clumsy attempt at shifting focus? Don't just look at Andrew, look at Meghan too. Or is it something colder? A calculated reminder that Meghan's halo might not be as untarnished as Harry believes. But let's flip the perspective. What if Fergie slipped, revealing a truth she didn't mean to? She's known for being unguarded, too chatty, too unfiltered. What if, in her attempt to reminisce or deflect, she let slip a detail that connects Meghan to Andrew in ways no one dared say out loud before? That possibility is chilling because if Meghan was indeed connected to Andrew long before Harry, then the story we've been sold, the fairy tale of love at first sight, becomes something much darker. Was Meghan's introduction to the royal family really through Harry? Or was Andrew the initial point of contact, making Harry's romance less serendipitous and more orchestrated? Think about the irony here. Meghan, who has consistently positioned herself as a victim of the royals, might actually have been connected to one of its most tainted figures from the beginning. And if that's true, it undercuts everything Harry has claimed. His crusade against the press, his speeches about Meghan being misunderstood, his defense of her integrity. If Meghan's relationship with the royals began with Andrew, of all people, then Harry has been defending a narrative built on half-truths. But here's where the emotional dagger twists. Imagine Harry hearing this for the first time. The man who walked away from the monarchy to protect his wife now finds out she may have been linked to its biggest scandal long before him. Betrayal, humiliation, doubt. It's not just about Meghan's past. It's about Harry's pride. He has stood on global stages insisting his marriage is based on love, trust, and destiny. But Sarah Ferguson's words suggest it may have started with opportunity, connections, and ambition. How do you defend your wife against that when the accusation comes from inside your own family? And let's not overlook the public's reaction. To the average person, first client is salacious, suggestive, and scandalous. It doesn't matter if Fergie meant it literally or metaphorically. The damage is already done. Meghan's name is now being whispered alongside Andrew's in ways that can't be undone. Headlines don't care about nuance. Social media doesn't wait for clarification. All they need is the seed of scandal, and Sarah Ferguson just planted it in the most fertile ground possible. But let me ask you this. Do you think Meghan was prepared for this? She's fought tabloids, in-laws, and the British establishment. But Fergie's revelation comes from a place she can't easily attack. Meghan can't accuse Fergie of being racist. She can't dismiss her as a toxic tabloid. Fergie is family. She's lived it all. And that makes Meghan's defense infinitely harder. And then there's Andrew himself. Silent, hiding in the shadows, yet still lingering in the royal ecosystem. For him, this link to Meghan is almost convenient. If Meghan becomes the focus of yacht whispers, then maybe, just maybe, attention shifts away from his own sins. Could Fergie have dropped this line to shield Andrew? To muddy the waters so much that the public can no longer separate Meghan's alleged yacht days from Andrew's very real scandals? If so, it's a brilliant, if cruel, tactic. But here's where the cliffhanger grows sharp. Fergie's words are not the end of the story. They are the beginning of a chain reaction that forces us to question everything about Meghan's pre-Harry life. Who was she really connected to? What deals were whispered in those glamorous circles? And most importantly, was Prince Harry truly blindsided, or has he known more than he ever let on? Because as the whispers grow louder, and as Meghan's past collides with Andrew's infamy, one thing becomes painfully clear. The fairy tale was never as clean as it seemed. And Harry's shock at Fergie's revelation is only the first of many humiliations yet to come. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Fame. For some, it's inherited. For others, it's fought for. And then there are those, like Meghan Markle, who clawed their way toward it with a mix of ambition, persistence, and calculated charm. Long before she was draped in royal titles, long before she was walking behind the Queen in designer coats, Meghan was a hustling actress in Hollywood, an industry that chews people up and spits them out. And it was in those years, when she was climbing, networking, and trying to break through, that the whispers of yacht days began to emerge. Whispers that would follow her across oceans and decades, eventually colliding with her royal destiny. Picture Meghan in her early 30s, a beautiful woman in Los Angeles with some television credits, but not enough to make her a household name. Suits gave her stability, yes, but not superstardom. Off camera, she was trying everything. Blogging, fashion, charity networking, social climbing. She knew how to position herself, how to get into the right rooms, how to meet the right people. Hollywood is brutal. It rewards who you know, not just what you can do. Meghan knew this, and like many in her position, she understood that opportunities didn't always come through auditions. Sometimes, they came through connections forged in the kind of elite circles most people never even glimpse. Now let's talk about those circles. The yacht scene was, and still is, notorious. Cannes Film Festival, Monte Carlo, Ibiza, Mykonos, floating playgrounds where billionaires, playboys, royals, and aspiring actresses brush shoulders. To some, it was networking. To others, it was something darker. A marketplace where beauty was currency and ambition was the asking price. Meghan's name has been linked, never proven, but whispered, to this scene. Was she there as a guest? As company? As a networker hoping to meet someone who could open doors? No one can say definitively, but in gossip, perception becomes reality. And once her name became entangled with the word yacht, the stain was impossible to wash away. Here's the contradiction that makes this so compelling. Meghan, as Duchess, presents herself as the self-made woman, the embodiment of empowerment. She speaks at podiums about female independence, about rejecting objectification. And yet, the rumors of her yacht days suggest a past where ambition may have led her into worlds where empowerment blurred into compromise. That duality fascinates the public because it raises a tantalizing question. Who is the real Meghan? The principled duchess who preaches about values, or the savvy striver who used every tool at her disposal to climb? Let me ask you directly, would you judge her for it? If you were in her shoes, beautiful, ambitious, but stuck in the endless grind of auditions, would you walk onto that yacht if it meant a chance to change your life? Many would. And that's the uncomfortable truth. Meghan's hustle is not unique. What makes it explosive is that she went from that hustle straight into the British monarchy, an institution built on spotless image and public reverence. Suddenly, the whispers of her past aren't just whispers. They're dynamite aimed at the foundation of a centuries-old institution. Now layer in Sarah Ferguson's revelation. Fergie has essentially said out loud what others only whispered, that Meghan's yacht days and Andrew's world may have overlapped. That Meghan wasn't just floating on the periphery of Hollywood, but may have been drawn closer to the murkier edges of royal life before Harry even appeared. This is devastating because it reframes Meghan's love story. No longer does it look like fate. It begins to look like strategy. And strategy is the last thing Harry wants associated with his marriage. But let's dig into Meghan's Hollywood years a little deeper. She was strategic long before she met Harry. Her blog, The Tig, wasn't just a passion project, it was branding. She courted powerful friends, from Serena Williams to Jessica Mulroney. She knew the value of being seen in the right company. She dated men who could elevate her social standing. She wasn't reckless, she was precise. Which is why the idea of yacht networking fits uncomfortably well into her pattern. It was another ladder, another room to enter, another step closer to the life she envisioned for herself. Now, imagine the irony. Meghan spent years being overlooked in Hollywood. Casting directors passed her by, critics dismissed her, tabloids barely noticed her. And yet, the very thing she may have used to survive those years, the yacht connections, the whispers of networking with powerful men, are now the very things used against her. Her ambition gave her a seat at the table, but her ambition also left behind shadows she can't escape. Harry, of course, doesn't want to hear this. To him, Meghan was the woman who saved him. The woman who offered him freedom from the gilded cage of royal life. But what happens when he realizes that Meghan's past wasn't as disconnected from his world as he believed? That perhaps she knew more, saw more, and maneuvered closer to royalty long before their blind date? Would that change the way he views their marriage? Or worse, would it change the way he views himself as the man who was played, rather than the man who rescued? And this brings us back to the public. Because the public isn't just watching, they're judging. They remember Meghan's speeches. They remember her claims of innocence and victimhood. And now, with Fergie's words hanging in the air, the narrative twists. The once victim now looks like a player. The once romantic story now looks like a calculated plotline. And that shift in perception is lethal, because reputations aren't destroyed by truth alone. They're destroyed by the possibility that the truth might be uglier than the fairy tale. But here's the real cliffhanger. Meghan's Hollywood hustle and her alleged yacht days are only half the story. The other half lies in how those whispers transformed once she entered Harry's world. Because when ambition meets royalty, and when secrets collide with crowns, the stakes aren't just personal, they're global. And the next revelation, the one that tied Harry's fury to Meghan's past, would prove that the cracks in their story were deeper than anyone imagined. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It always begins with a whisper, not an article, not a headline, just a murmur in a dark corner of Hollywood, a blind item slipped into a gossip blog, a half-joke shared at a party that makes its way into print. For Meghan Markle, those whispers of yacht days were the kindling. And once she stepped into the royal spotlight, the tabloids took those sparks and fanned them into a firestorm. Because the truth is, Meghan didn't just marry into a family. She married into centuries of scrutiny. Every rumor from her past, no matter how faint, suddenly became ammunition. And in the age of digital gossip, the more salacious the story, the faster it spread. Let's rewind to the early 2010s, before Meghan had met Harry. The internet was already awash with blind items, cryptic posts on gossip blogs that didn't name names but dropped enough hints for the public to speculate. An actress known more for her ambition than her talent spotted on a yacht in Cannes. A cable TV starlet making connections overseas. These weren't full-blown exposés. They were shadows, designed to tantalize readers into filling in the blanks. But when Meghan's profile began to rise, people started connecting the dots. Whether or not those dots were real almost didn't matter. The narrative was already forming. Now, fast forward to the moment Meghan was introduced to the world as Harry's girlfriend. Overnight, she went from supporting actress to global obsession. And that's when the tabloids pounced. Every blind item from years earlier was suddenly dragged back up and repackaged as evidence. Did Meghan attend yacht parties? Did she mingle with powerful men looking for companionship? The tabloids didn't need proof, they needed innuendo. Because innuendo sells. And in Meghan, they found the perfect subject, glamorous, polarizing, and now tied to the most famous family on earth. But here's the twist. Meghan had already mastered the art of shaping her image. She knew how to play the media game. Her carefully curated Instagram feed, her lifestyle blog The Tig, her connections with influencers and stylists. She projected an image of sophistication and empowerment. So when the tabloids dragged her into yacht rumors, the clash was irresistible. On one hand, Meghan the polished humanitarian. On the other, Meghan the ambitious actress allegedly tied to shady glamour. That contradiction made her a lightning rod. The public was split. Was she a victim of misogynistic gossip, or was there more truth to the whispers than she let on? And this is where Harry enters the picture. Imagine his position. He had finally found a woman he believed would love him for who he was, not for his title. He saw Meghan as his escape, his partner in defiance. And then suddenly, he was confronted with headlines that painted her as someone who may have been entangled with his disgraced uncle's world. Can you imagine the humiliation? For a man already scarred by a lifetime of being chased by the press, this was salt in an open wound. Friends of Harry have hinted at his temper, his quick fuse when it comes to defending Meghan. We've seen it in interviews, in statements, in lawsuits against tabloids. But those lawsuits weren't just about privacy. They were about pride. Because what the tabloids had done wasn't just question Meghan's past. They had questioned Harry's judgment. They had planted seeds of doubt in the one place Harry couldn't afford to be uncertain, his marriage. Let's pause here and reflect. Blind items and gossip blogs aren't meant to be definitive. They're smoke, not fire. But in the royal world, smoke is enough. Because perception is everything. And when perception turns against you, when the public begins to wonder whether you're hiding something, the battle is already half lost. Meghan could deny the yacht stories all she wanted, but the whispers lived on. The more she fought them, the more they grew. And here's where Sarah Ferguson's revelation becomes devastating. By linking Meghan to Andrew, she essentially validated the whispers. She gave credibility to rumors that had been dismissed for years as tabloid cruelty. And for Harry, that was unbearable. Because now it wasn't just faceless tabloids whispering about Meghan's past. It was family. It was someone who had lived inside the palace walls, someone who knew the darkest royal secrets, adding fuel to the fire. The irony here is rich. Meghan had accused the press of being merciless, of destroying her peace. But when the yacht rumors re-emerged through Sarah Ferguson's lips, they weren't just tabloid inventions anymore. They became part of the royal narrative. And Harry, already furious with his family for not defending Meghan, was left humiliated. Not only could he not protect her, but now he couldn't even dismiss the accusations as lies. Because if the family itself was suggesting it, then what was the truth? Let me ask you this. How do you think Harry reacted when he first heard those whispers inside his own circle? Anger? Shock? Or was there a flicker of doubt he would never admit out loud? Because that flicker, once it takes hold, is hard to extinguish. And that's the cruel power of gossip. It doesn't need to be true to be devastating. It just needs to be possible. But here's the cliffhanger. The whispers were only the beginning. What happened next wasn't just about gossip blogs or tabloids. It was about Harry himself confronting Meghan directly. And according to those close to him, his private reaction wasn't the calm, supportive husband image he showed to the world. Behind closed doors, his words were far more cutting and far more revealing. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Trust. It's the cornerstone of every marriage, isn't it? Without it, love collapses into suspicion, loyalty turns into paranoia, and every smile hides a question mark. For Prince Harry, Trust has always been fragile. His childhood was marked by betrayal, from the paparazzi that hounded his mother to the courtiers who leaked stories about him to the press. He grew up in a palace where secrets were currency and where loyalty often came at a price. So when he married Meghan Markle, he clung to the belief that she was different, that she was his escape, his salvation, his partner in truth. But Sarah Ferguson's words, the whispers of yacht days, and the surfacing blind items tore at that fragile trust. And Harry's reaction, behind closed doors, was nothing short of explosive. Picture the scene in Montecito. The California sun streaming in, the serenity of palm trees and ocean air meant to symbolize the freedom Harry and Meghan had fought for. And yet, inside their mansion, peace was the one thing they didn't have. The whispers had reached Harry's ears. Not from tabloids this time, not from faceless journalists, but from his own aunt by marriage. Sarah Ferguson, someone who had lived in the Windsor world, who had nothing to gain by siding with the press, and yet chose to put Meghan's name in the same sentence as Andrew's scandals. Imagine Harry's fury. He confronted Meghan. Friends close to him say his anger wasn't a controlled, measured frustration, it was volcanic. Years of bottled-up rage at the press, the monarchy, and now even his family spilled over. Why didn't you tell me? A question he may have asked, not because he believed the rumors were true, but because the possibility was enough to shake him. The very possibility that Meghan hadn't been completely transparent with him gnawed at the wounds of a lifetime spent in half-truths and betrayals. Meghan, of course, defended herself. She had always known these rumors existed. She had fought them before. To her, they were nothing more than misogynistic attacks, attempts to discredit ambitious women. But Harry wasn't hearing it the same way anymore. When tabloids whispered, he dismissed them. But when Fergie spoke, he couldn't. Because Sarah Ferguson wasn't an outsider, she was an insider. An insider who had lived and breathed royal scandal. And if she said Meghan's name in that context, then Harry had to wonder, how much of it was exaggeration and how much of it was truth? Let me ask you this. What happens when the person you've sacrificed everything for becomes the source of your humiliation? Harry gave up his titles, his military roles, his homeland, all for Meghan. He fought his brother. He alienated his father. He burned bridges that may never be rebuilt. And now, the woman he defended with every ounce of his being was being linked to his disgraced uncle's murky world. How does a man process that? Anger was the first response. But underneath the anger lurked something far more dangerous, doubt. Doubt is insidious. It creeps in during quiet moments. It whispers at night when the world is still. For Harry, doubt meant replaying every story Meghan had told him about her past. Every omission suddenly felt suspicious. Every detail suddenly begged for scrutiny. Was the story of their blind date really as organic as it seemed? Or had Meghan maneuvered into his orbit long before, using connections that might have included people like Andrew? Was she the victim of a cruel press? Or had she simply learned to play the game better than anyone else? Now, let's talk about the irony. Meghan has always portrayed herself as brutally honest. She told Oprah she never Googled Harry before meeting him. She told the world she went into the royal family naive, unprepared. She presented herself as a woman who stumbled into history. But what if Harry began to see contradictions? What if he realized her ambition, the same ambition he admired, might also have driven her into circles she never wanted him to know about? That realization wouldn't just hurt his pride, it would cut to the core of his identity. Because Harry has always seen himself as a protector, a man who shields his loved ones from danger. But what if the danger had been in his own house all along? Here's the emotional twist. Meghan wasn't just defending herself from gossip. She was defending her marriage. Because once doubt enters, love becomes conditional. Meghan knew the stakes. She knew Harry's temper, his fragility, his trauma. She knew one wrong move could fracture everything they had built. So she fought back. She painted herself as the victim, as always. She reminded Harry of the cruelty of the press, of how they had tried to destroy her from day one. She turned the tables. Are you going to believe them over me? A question designed to sting, to shame Harry into silence. But Harry's silence didn't mean the doubt disappeared. No, it simmered, and those around him began to notice. Friends whispered that Harry looked more withdrawn, more distracted, that his once unshakable defense of Meghan now carried a hint of strain. That behind the cameras, the perfect couple wasn't so perfect anymore. And here's where the cliffhanger tightens the knot. Harry thought he knew Meghan's past. He thought he had heard it all. But Fergie's words made him realize there might be chapters missing. And those missing chapters weren't just inconvenient. They were humiliating. Because if Meghan's past intersected with Andrew's world, then Harry hadn't married the outsider he thought he had. He had married someone already entangled in the very royal scandal he had tried to escape. And what Harry discovered next, when he pushed for answers, would prove more shocking than anything Sarah Ferguson ever said. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Why now? That's the burning question. Why would Sarah Ferguson, after decades of her own scandals, suddenly drop Meghan's name into the swamp of Andrew's tainted world? Why would she risk the inevitable backlash? For someone who has survived by clinging to Andrew's side, even after divorce, it seems reckless, even self-destructive. But nothing Sarah Ferguson does is without motive. Her timing, her phrasing, her willingness to stir the pot, they all point to something deeper. And when you peel back the layers, the reasons become as complicated and as dangerous as the revelation itself. Let's begin with Sarah Ferguson's lifelong role in the royal soap opera. From the moment she married Andrew, she was an outsider battling against perception. She was branded too loud, too messy, too reckless. She embarrassed the monarchy with her financial missteps, her affairs, and of course, the toe-sucking scandal that will haunt her forever. Yet, despite all of this, she never truly left the royal orbit. Why? Because of Andrew. She remained by his side, raising their daughters together, even sharing a home long after their divorce. Their bond has been unbreakable, for better or worse. And when Andrew's world came crashing down with Epstein, Sarah chose loyalty. She defended him publicly, even when silence would have been wiser. So what does this mean for Meghan? Well, consider this. Sarah Ferguson has been defined, for decades, by her connection to Andrew. His scandals have overshadowed hers, but they have also chained her to a sinking ship. And when you're drowning, what's the instinct? To pull someone else down with you. By tying Meghan to Andrew, even loosely, even with a suggestive phrase like first client, Fergie effectively spreads the scandal. It's no longer just Andrew's shame. It's Meghan's too. And that diffusion of blame, whether intentional or not, protects Andrew by muddying the waters. But there's another angle. Sarah Ferguson has always been jealous of attention. She watched Diana outshine her in the 1980s. She's watched Kate Middleton be embraced as the perfect duchess. And then Meghan arrived. American, glamorous, commanding global headlines overnight. Meghan's Oprah interview, Meghan's podcasts, Meghan's Netflix deals. Meghan became the story in a way Sarah never could be. Is it possible Fergie's comment came from a place of resentment? A way to remind the world, don't paint Meghan as a victim, she's just like the rest of us. For Sarah, who has endured decades of being mocked, the chance to puncture Meghan's carefully polished narrative might have been too tempting to resist. And let's not underestimate Sarah's knack for survival. She has an uncanny ability to resurface whenever the spotlight fades. Books, interviews, talk show appearances, she thrives on relevance. Dropping Meghan's name into Andrew's scandal ensures she stays in the headlines. It makes her part of the ongoing Sussex saga, guaranteeing she remains newsworthy. After all, what better way to make yourself indispensable than by inserting yourself into the most controversial royal story of the decade? But here's the deeper cut. Could Fergie actually be telling the truth? For all her recklessness, Sarah Ferguson is no fool. She knows the royal family thrives on secrecy. She knows how dangerous it is to cross certain lines. And yet, she crossed one, which raises the unsettling possibility that she knows more than she's letting on, that she has seen or heard things about Meghan's past, about Andrew's world, that give her words a sliver of credibility. If that's true, then her motive might not be jealousy or deflection, it might be revenge. Revenge against Meghan for daring to step into the royal spotlight and claim the role of outsider victim that Fergie has carried for years. Now, think about the timing. Harry and Meghan are at their weakest point in years. Their Spotify deal collapsed. Their Netflix arrangement is shaky. Their popularity is plummeting on both sides of the Atlantic. Even their once unbreakable bond with progressive Hollywood elites is showing cracks. For Fergie to drop this revelation now isn't coincidence. It's strategy. She knew the press would pounce. She knew the public, already skeptical of Meghan, would latch onto it. In short, she knew the story would stick. And it has. For Harry, this is the ultimate betrayal. Because he expected the tabloids to attack. He expected the institution to undermine him. But he didn't expect Sarah Ferguson, of all people, to throw Meghan under the bus. Fergie, the woman who knows what it's like to be mocked, shunned, and humiliated, chose not to shield Meghan, but to expose her. And that irony is devastating. So what's Fergie's endgame? Some say it's about money. Controversy sells, and Sarah has always needed financial lifelines. Others say it's about power, reminding the world that she still holds royal secrets. Still others believe it's about deflection, keeping Andrew out of the direct line of fire by dragging Meghan into the same orbit. But whatever the reason, the impact is undeniable. Her words have destabilized Harry and Meghan in ways the press never could. Because when the knife comes from family, it cuts deeper. And here's where the cliffhanger sharpens. Sarah Ferguson's motives may be murky, but her timing was lethal. And the fallout didn't just rattle Meghan. It sent shockwaves through the palace itself. Because for the first time, whispers about Meghan's past weren't just a tabloid game. They were being discussed behind palace walls. And what those discussions revealed would prove even more humiliating for Harry. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Double standards. They've always been the dirty secret of the British monarchy, haven't they? What one royal is allowed to get away with, another is crucified for. What is forgiven in men becomes unforgivable in women. What is swept under the rug for insiders is magnified under a spotlight for outsiders. And nowhere is that more glaring than in the comparison between Prince Andrew and Meghan Markle. One man's decades of shameful behavior were shielded by the institution, while one woman's whispered yacht rumors are enough to paint her as irredeemable. That contradiction isn't just hypocrisy, it's the very heart of the scandal Sarah Ferguson has reignited. Let's start with Andrew. For years, his behavior was an open secret. His playboy lifestyle, his questionable friendships, his frequenting of yachts and private islands. Whispers of exploitation, of entitlement, of indulgence that crossed lines ordinary people could never imagine. The press knew. The palace knew. And yet, he was protected. His military roles were celebrated. His daughters were paraded at royal events. And his scandals were quietly buried. Even when Jeffrey Epstein's name became radioactive, Andrew was allowed to deny, until the infamous "I don't sweat" interview finally destroyed what little credibility he had left. By then, the damage was undeniable, but for decades before, the monarchy shielded him. Now contrast that with Meghan. She entered the royal world as an outsider, an American actress, biracial, divorced, ambitious. Every single part of her identity was a red flag to the palace's traditionalists. From day one, she was scrutinized. Her clothes, her smile, her gestures, her spending, nothing was too small to become a headline. And when whispers of yacht days surfaced, instead of being dismissed as baseless, they were weaponized. Suddenly, Meghan wasn't just the glamorous new duchess. She was calculating. She was opportunistic. She was not one of us. The palace that bent over backwards to shield Andrew from accountability had no problem letting Meghan burn in the court of public opinion. Do you see the irony? The monarchy protected a man tied to Epstein, but let a woman be shredded over rumors. That double standard isn't just unfair, it's telling. It reveals how the institution prioritizes blood over merit, insiders over outsiders, men over women. And Harry, watching it unfold, couldn't help but feel the sting. He left the royal family because he said they failed to protect Meghan. And here was the ultimate proof. His uncle Andrew, a man disgraced worldwide, was treated with more dignity than his wife ever was. But let's not forget Sarah Ferguson's role in this. By dragging Meghan into Andrew's orbit, Fergie exposed this hypocrisy for the world to see. Was that her intention? Or was it simply a side effect of her careless words? Either way, the result is clear. The public now sees Meghan and Andrew's names linked, and the palace's double standards become even harder to deny. Because how can anyone defend protecting Andrew while vilifying Meghan? It doesn't add up. Here's the emotional dagger. For Meghan, this wasn't just about reputation, it was about survival. She has always insisted that the palace left her vulnerable, unprotected, even unsafe. And now, Sarah Ferguson's revelation proves her point in the cruelest way possible. If Meghan had truly been tied to Andrew's world, the palace would have known. They would have investigated. They would have buried it, if she were one of them. But instead, they let her dangle, let the rumors swirl, let the tabloids feast. Why? Because Meghan wasn't worth protecting. She was expendable. And for Harry, that realization is devastating. He gave up everything to protect Meghan. But now, in the harsh light of Fergie's comment, he has to face an ugly truth. The institution will always protect its own, even when they're guilty. And it will always expose outsiders, even when they're innocent. That contradiction doesn't just humiliate Harry. It confirms his worst fears, that his fight was doomed from the start. Let me ask you this. Do you think the public sees this clearly? Because while some dismiss the Meghan rumors as misogynistic gossip, others cling to them because they want to believe the worst. That's the cruel part of double standards. They don't just exist within the palace. They exist in us, the audience. We forgive who we like, and we condemn who we don't. And Meghan, whether you adore her or despise her, has never been given the benefit of the doubt. But here's the cliffhanger. Sarah Ferguson's comment didn't just expose double standards. It triggered conversations inside the palace itself. Conversations about whether Meghan's presence, past or present, had tainted the monarchy more than Andrew ever did. And those private discussions revealed something shocking. The royals weren't just whispering about Meghan. They were considering action. Action that could alter Harry and Meghan's standing forever. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Blindside. That's the only word that captures the storm Prince Harry found himself in after Sarah Ferguson's bombshell. For a man who has built his post-royal identity around control, controlling his story, controlling his truth, controlling the narrative, Fergie's offhand remark hit like a sucker punch. And it didn't come from the press he despises or the institution he abandoned. It came from inside, from family, from the very place Harry has been trying and failing to escape his entire life. Imagine Harry in that moment. The anger boiling in his chest, the disbelief flashing across his face. His whole body language shifts, the jaw tightening, the hands clenching, the glare that once was aimed at paparazzi now turned inward at those closest to him. Because the humiliation wasn't just public, it was personal. His wife, the woman he gave up everything to defend, was now being tied to the shameful orbit of Andrew by someone who should have known better. Friends of Harry have spoken of his temper. He is quick to rage, quick to lash out when he feels betrayed. And betrayal has been a theme of his life. He felt betrayed by the press that hounded Diana, betrayed by courtiers who leaked about him, betrayed by a family he believes sacrificed him to protect others. But this betrayal cut differently. Because if Fergie's words held even a grain of truth, then it wasn't just the world that had deceived him, it was Meghan. And even if he never admitted it out loud, the suspicion gnawed at him. In private, Harry reportedly exploded. Not at Sarah Ferguson, though she was the source, but at Meghan. Because when whispers come from family, a man has only one place to turn: his wife. His questions were sharp, his tone unrelenting. Why is she saying this? What aren't you telling me? Meghan, of course, denied it. She insisted it was nonsense, misogynistic smear tactics repackaged by a woman who had her own axe to grind. But Harry couldn't let it go. Because for him, it wasn't just about Meghan's denial, it was about the optics. The humiliation of having his wife's name splashed alongside Andrew's in global headlines. The man who had shamed the monarchy more than anyone else now had Meghan's reputation chained to his own. Let's pause and ask the hard question. Was Harry angrier because he feared the rumors were true, or because he feared the world might believe they were true? That's the cruel irony of scandal. It doesn't need to be real to be destructive. All it needs is plausibility. And Meghan's Hollywood past, her ambition, her carefully curated image, all of it made the whispers plausible enough to sting. Those close to Harry say he was blindsided. He didn't see it coming. He had braced himself for the tabloids to keep attacking Meghan. He had braced himself for tension with his brother, with his father. But not this. Not Sarah Ferguson, of all people. Not a woman who knew what it felt like to be cast out. For Harry, the humiliation wasn't just that Meghan's name was dragged into Andrew's orbit. It was that someone who should have empathized with Meghan instead chose to expose her. It made him question everything about loyalty within the family. And Meghan? Meghan was furious too, but for different reasons. To her, this wasn't about truth or lies. It was about survival. She saw Fergie's words as yet another attempt to smear her, to reduce her to gossip, to undermine her role as Harry's partner. She flipped the argument back onto Harry. You're supposed to defend me, not question me. She knew how to shift the narrative, to make the issue not about her past, but about his loyalty. And Harry, torn between anger and devotion, was left spinning. But the cracks were there. Friends noticed it. Staff whispered about it. Harry's once unshakable defenses of Meghan now carried hesitation. In interviews, in casual conversations, his tone shifted. He still defended her publicly, yes, but privately, the fury lingered. He was blindsided, humiliated, and for the first time,